Order, there are 7 board members present. I'll entertain a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Motion passes 7-0.
The next item is 3A, public comments. Casey, are there any public comments this evening?
We do not have any.
Thank you. As a reminder, anyone wishing to provide public comment should complete the online request to submit comments form, which will need to be completed by 1 p.m. on Wednesday, the day of the board meeting. Next is the consent agenda. The items listed on the consent agenda are considered by the Board of Education to be routine business items. Approval of the items may be made by a single motion, second, and majority vote with no separate discussion of any item listed. Should a member of the board desire to discuss any item at his or her request, it will be removed from the consent agenda and considered separately. What are the wishes of the board?
I move to approve the consent agenda as submitted.
Second. Motion passes 7-0.
The next item is 7A, Boys and Girls Club of South Central Kansas, 60-day notice.
Assistant Superintendent of Business Operations Pam Stranathan is going to join and provide some additional information. We were very disappointed that we received notification late yesterday that they were going to give us a 60-day notice, and then we talked with them this morning. Pam had talked with them yesterday, and then we talked with them this morning, and they continued to say that they were giving us a 60-day notice, which really does not allow us a really good time period to be able to put together quality childcare after school.
Yeah, so to provide a little bit of history on this, Megan had reached out to me a couple of months ago referencing to the fact that they may have to reduce because of the numbers. But at that time, it was just a conversation. They were trying to figure out cost. One of the things that I did share with them was that, well, keep this into consideration. If you reduce, you're going to have to figure out a way in which to get kids bused over to the site. Because since all of our schools let out at the same time, one thing I did share with them at that time that, you know, I would hope that we could have conversations about that in reference. And so it kind of got quiet, didn't hear back. Their board meeting, they had talked financials. I asked for a breakdown of what it was costing per site so that I could kind of look at the budget there, because I thought, okay, if there's some way that I can figure out funding, maybe we can help support it in some capacity at that time. They gave a breakdown, so I had conversations with Megan's supervisor about the cost, and you know, I'm not understanding exactly why you would need to reduce down. A large part, what was shared at that time, was it had to do with they were offering scholarships to a lot of our students and families. And I was still struggling with that conversation of figuring out still financially why it needed to be reduced. So then it was quiet, and then Megan reached out and wanted to have a meeting and said a couple of board members were going to be on there. So I'm thinking going into that meeting late afternoon yesterday that it was to tell us we were for sure going to do 3 sites and have a discussion further. Well, it was to tell us that they were completely dropping. And so I shared my concerns about how a year ago I had talked specifically with them, and I know they had talked here about going out for funding, looking at stuff. Dr. Harder had given some information to them in reference to some contacts. I provided a letter to them, and I said specifically, there are people in this district that have a lot of contacts with people in the community that are associated with different grant funders, and that when they start reaching out to them, to please let us know, and so that we can support that. So their grant writer apparently did not. The communication back to what I found out when I asked more questions today was that if there was not a letter requested, then they didn't send a letter. So I'm not so sure the pursuit of funding was done at the integrity that I think as a district we would have liked to seen them pursue that. Granted, a comment to us was made today was that there was, that's, in hindsight, there probably could have been more. Well, hindsight's hindsight. That's not helping our families. I did express yesterday the concern about how just a year ago they had come to us, wanted to raise the fees and to help support the programs, did not, and I did question, how come a year ago? I would assume they're not doing funding month to month, that if they're having to raise fees, they're projecting to look out further to say a year from now, we may be in trouble if we don't get such and such funding. Didn't get a response back from that when talking to the committee. And so, I shared the concerns, the concerns with this, with the community, with our families, with this occurring at the time that it's occurring, of trying to get something in place. So when we got off there, they knew we were not, they wanted to do a joint, initially wanted us to do a joint statement out. I did not feel like that was, this is not a joint decision. This is their decision that they provided to us in a very short time frame. And also they wanted a contact for the district on that press release that they're releasing, and I felt like anybody that were making phone calls in reference to their decision needed to go to them and not to us. So that's where we're at. Very disheartening, very upsetting to have gotten that information from them.
Thanks, Pam. I think a lot of us probably have questions. I was just wondering, so Boys and Girls Club of South Central Kansas serves other communities. It's
Yes.
not just Emporia.
Right.
Are they seeing a reduction in services offered in other communities?
So today on the conversation, Dr. Harder asked if there was any other location that they were completely doing away with, and no, we are the only ones. In the news, if you look them up, you see in Lawrence, they did a reduction in staff, but not a complete, we're not doing anything.
Right, and reduction in staff isn't necessarily a reduction in
Program.
Right.
Correct.
Yeah, thank you.
This is really disappointing. So help me, I just want to make sure I have my information straight. They've given us a 60-day notice with 7 years remaining in our memorandum of understanding.
Correct.
Because we signed a 10-year MOU
Correct.
with them.
Correct.
And they're bailing 7 years early.
Correct. And remember, a year ago, when there was talk about, whether we were looking at some stuff with the rec, they had approached us about the MOU and how we had a 10-year agreement, so how could we, separate out of that, which I think is now kind of a turn of the table. Now they're wanting to use that to leave us. So.
They did say also that it was on an administrative recommendation that the board made that decision separately as part of the financial
Yeah.
review.
One of the things too was, my question to them was why there was no opportunity for anybody from the district to talk to their board or to even, have a reference to what can we do, and that was one thing I kept saying to them, this was prior to when they brought up just reducing down, was, okay, what can we do? Let's talk together what we can do and figure this out. So, yeah.
So as you just mentioned, the board made the decision, and you may not know the answer to this, but is their board more of a Wichita-based board, or to your
Yeah.
knowledge, or?
I don't know that. I don't know where, 'cause
And that's understandable, yeah.
I don't know how their board is based. And so
Okay.
I don't know if anybody else has looked them up, so.
Well, and if you remember, when they had the presentation, they were looking for an Emporia board member. So they had board members from every other community they served, but did not have one for Emporia. So I do not believe that they have one from Emporia.
I don't think so.
Are there other questions? Okay. And I would just like to say, I know that this was shocking news to us all today, but to reassure our families that we will be providing some form of after-school care in the coming school year, that's something that we're working on as a district moving forward. It just might not be with Boys and Girls Club.
Or it might be. We'll see. We'll see.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm just staying up. I'm up
Well,
next.
it's an action.
Well,
We need to do
I think
it.
I'm
I
up here
guess
for a while.
this is an action item.
Yes, I think,
Yes.
to move that we acknowledge that the 60-day notice has been provided to the school. It's not in agreeance to accept, just that it's been provided.
I move that we acknowledge that the 60-day notice has been provided to the school district and task administration with exploring other options for after-school care for our elementary students during the 2025-2026 school year.
Second.
Motion passes 7-0.
Next is item 7B, the purchase of 2 route buses.
This is in reference to the transportation asking for 2 buses. This is on the cycle, and you have a copy of the bids that came in through the, off the state bids. And then these are 2 regular route buses, and you also have the cycle of rotation on there that was provided that lets you know what that looks like. So this year would be the 2 buses that she's requesting for the rotation.
I'll make a motion to approve purchasing 2 route buses from Midwest Transit as submitted.
Second. Motion passes 7-0.
Now, we have a special guest. Corey's here for the next 2.
The next item is 7C, storefront for EHS boiler room.
Evening. So we talked about with that boiler project, we'd have to take the storefront out to get the old boilers out and the new boilers in. That has been taken down with a temporary wood structure put up in its place. Instead of trying to put the old structure back, that's already been taken out and put back in once. It's not in very good shape. What we'd like to do is put in a full-size 12-foot garage door with a walk-through door beside it. Before it had 2 walk-through doors, which weren't big enough to put any equipment in. So this will allow us to use it for a garage space. With the 12-foot door, we can actually park one of the snowplow trucks in there in the winter. The new boilers are small enough that it actually gives us a full parking spot. DH Pace is who we looked at to do that. They've given us a buy board bid of $37,000. That's for the install of the storefront and both doors. The garage door will be a manually roll-up door. We're not spending the money on an electric door for something that's going to be used, a handful of times a year, hopefully. The walk-through door is just a standard walk-through door, but it's heavy duty so that we have, the 10 to 15 years of expected use out of it. Any questions?
Yeah, I just have one question. So not necessarily opposed to this, just out of curiosity, what would the cost be to replace with the same system that we have now?
roughly the same, because what was in there now is a bunch of glass. So you have the two doors, we're at one door, so you'd have still double the cost of the doors that we're doing now. And then we'd have glass, so we would lose on our efficiency in that room. And we'd also have extended costs on, say, the vehicle being outside versus inside where it's protected. The cost of a storefront is roughly the same as the cost to do the doors. So really, I think we're actually saving money in the big picture to do the doors instead of the traditional storefront.
Thank you.
Okay, that was easy. Great question, Lillian. I move to approve the quote from DH Pace to furnish and install the storefront door package at the EHS boiler room as submitted.
Motion passes 7-0.
The next item is 7D, change order for EHS boiler replacement.
So as the demo has completed, they actually finished that up today for demoing out the old equipment. There may be some other lines that end up getting demoed out, but the majority's out for now. We found that the expansion tank, so we have a hot water system, pumps hot water all around the building. Hot water and cold water expand and contract differently, so you have to have an expansion tank for when those pipes get too full and the boilers are full. So that expansion tank that was in there was actually original to the building. When we got everything out of the way and could really get a good look at it, it's not in very good shape. So we'd like to put in a new one that would be up to code. The old one would still have to be recoded and would be expensive to do that. For $8,666 on a TIPS bid, because we're adding that to the original bid, we could have a brand new tank, fully certified, that's actually sized optimally for the system. The old tank would work with the new system, but it's not optimally sized. And like I say, we'd have to actually get it recertified and rebuilt, which would, one, slow us down, and two, would probably cost us roughly what a new tank would, being as it's so old and everything would have to be retrofit. So we would like to just get the new tank, put it in instead of trying to reuse the old tank.
So like, it's over 50 years old then?
1973.
Okay, so yeah. Well, I would say that it's worth replacing then, if I can go ahead and make that motion this evening. I move to approve the change order for an increase of $8,666 for the EHS boiler replacement project as submitted.
Second.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item is 7E, vape detectors for Emporia High School.
Okay, we have Pam Stranathan again, and we also have Mr. Brent Burns, Assistant Principal of Emporia High School, here to provide additional information as well.
So, yeah, that was his pink, so I thought it was creative, so. I had shared a few Fridays back in reference to the vaping devices that we were piloting at the high school. We wanted to pilot those at the middle school, but was not able to get those in a timely manner, so we continued to pilot it at the high school. Verkada is a company that is being used by several high schools. I'm very familiar with it from prior working with them and working with a high school that had those devices. What the device does is it's placed inside and it detects particles. Part of it that we're not using right now that we could have piloted, it also has a sound so that if there's any vandalism or stuff, it can notify people too. Or if loud screaming and yelling is going on in the bathroom, it can also, so that if there would be a fight breakout or something, it would also be able to share that with the administration. What the devices do is there's also a camera that is mounted outside in the hallway, not in the bathroom, And what it does is it will send a notice to them, to the principals. It can go email or go text, and Brent's going to talk a little bit more about that, on how they've utilized that. But it notifies them, and then it also tags it in the camera. So then the camera videos who's coming in and out at that time when the devices are going off. So he'll share with you what you see in the first year with that. You kind of see things go up because kids are doing things, are vaping, and then it's getting detected, and then once they understand that those private areas are no longer available, then you'll start to see incidences go down. But wanted to let Brent share because they've been very, very happy with it, and he can share more about that. And then we're just requesting that to go ahead and put that completely, fill that out into that building, and then potentially look at next year of putting a pilot at the middle school and looking at that. One of the things that it's nice about this is you can turn those off and on. So for instance, when you have big events and stuff, you don't want the bathrooms to be from people going in and out and loud noises from events and activities with large crowds in there. So there's the capability of doing that too. So, all right, I'll turn it over to Brent and let him share.
Thank you. First, I was going to say I haven't seen this much pink since the Legally Blonde musical, so I was kind of waiting for everyone to get up and start singing. So that's. So I wanted to say, kind of just going to give you some background on kind of how searches when it came to like vapes would work in the past. Before we even had a portable vape detector, which I'll get to in a moment, you basically had to kind of catch them red-handed or hear that there was a report in order to do the search. You bring a student in, kind of check their bags, check their pockets. We've got a metal detector. And it was very hit or miss. It wasn't very easy to do. Last school year, we ended up purchasing a portable vape detector that our SROs or our security, so Larry or Officer Ayers when we had him, would be able to go into the bathrooms after, a little while, and they'd bring in their little portable vape detector, and they'd kind of watch what the reading would, and as the numbers go up, it was an indicator that someone had been in there vaping. That helped a lot also with trying to figure that out. Once we saw that the numbers readings went up, he'd be able to come back. We'd be able to go through camera footage. You'd spend a lot of time figuring out who went in there 5 minutes beforehand, 5 minutes after, trying to figure out was anybody in there. You'd be able to eventually narrow down which students you may want to have to do a search for, but it took a lot of time. Just that initial part could take 45 minutes, just because you're trying to figure out the time before, the time after, going through all that footage, identifying the student, where's the student at, and then bringing them in. So it took a lot of time, and it was really kind of hit or miss because it just happened to be wherever our security happened to go into that bathroom. So if they were going into the bathrooms maybe down by the gym, but someone was using it down by the science wing, we'd miss that. So it was kind of really hard to do that. So when I found out we were going to pilot these vape detectors with Verkada, we picked the restroom that was furthest away from the office, and we kind of got them installed there. The beauty of what this does is we do get that instant alert right away. It comes right through an email or a text message. It says, "High vape reading." It gives us a time. It actually connects right to a camera as well, and we can actually go open an email, and it'll give me a snapshot right away of that bathroom, and it'll say this is when the detector went off so that we know exactly what the time is, but it also does something else that's really neat when it comes to looking at footage. It has a motion detecting sensor on it as well. So instead of having to watch 30 minutes of footage before and after to see who was going in and out, I can actually just fast forward to each of those motion detection pieces, which speeds up the process a whole lot. So instead of taking, say, 45 minutes to identify which students were in there, we can do it in about 10. So a whole lot faster when it comes to getting them in. The other reason that's important is the students like to pass them off. So if you don't get them in there quickly, they go back to class, they kind of slide of hand, give it to somebody else, and it's really kind of hard to catch. We noticed we had much higher success rates with Verkada when it came to searches. I would say more than half the time if we pulled someone from one of the vape detectors, when it went off, we actually got we managed to pull a vape from those students. I compared data from this year and last year. This year we pulled 50 vapes, 50. And of those 50 vapes, 27 were THC, so we're talking marijuana. So more than half the vapes that we're getting are actually drugs. Last year, our total number was only 34, with 23 being THC. So we're still actually, unfortunately, I hate to say it, the vapes that we're getting are not nicotine primarily. They're primarily THC, and with it being legal, an hour and a half, you go up to Kansas City, it's a lot easier for kids to get a hold of them. So we're trying really hard at the high school to try to get the drugs out of the building. The students that we have caught over the last 2 years, we've only had one repeat offender. So either they've figured it out and they've stopped doing it, or they've gotten better at hiding it. I'd like to think that it's the first, that they're like, okay, we don't want to do that. So I kind of agree with what Pam had said. We'll probably see an uptick in how many people we're getting, but the kids start talking and they're like, oh, there's a vape detector, there's a vape detector. And the idea is to deter them from doing it, because if they know that they're in more bathrooms, now they don't feel like they have a safe place where they can go, use these. And the reason it's so important to get these devices out of the building is these kids don't really know what they're getting. When you talk to the students, it's interesting, when you get a student in there and they've already been busted, they become very forthcoming with where they get it. Because I always ask, they won't give you a name, but they'll kind of let you know how they're getting it. And what they're doing is they're using social media. There's people that'll come into Emporia, because I thought maybe it was like 1 or 2 people in town that was selling them. That's not what's going on. They showed me posts where they use Snapchat and Instagram. Hey, meet me at Peter Pan Park, $40, I'll get it. So now we have kids that are walking up, and they're getting them from complete strangers, which is really scary, So anything we can do to try to keep it out of the buildings and deter people from trying to use these will be huge. But we've loved them, they've been wonderful. I know Larry was here earlier, but I know he could speak also about how much it's really sped up his job. He's been allowed to do a lot more of his duties in the building with the amount of time that we've been able to save using Verkado right now. You guys have any questions for me right now?
I just want to say how much I appreciate that last part that you shared there, because for me, this is all about protecting, not punishing, right? It's encouraging kids. We want them in school. We don't want to suspend them. We don't want to kick them out. And we don't want them harming themselves with ingesting something they don't know what it is. So it can seem so big brothery, but for me, it's truly about protecting them and keeping them in school. Because I don't want them out. I want them there, learning.
I think we all
and
do.
graduating.
Yes, absolutely.
I just wanted to clarify, when you talk about the cameras, and I assume the cameras are only, coming and going. So there's no misunderstanding that they're in the restrooms.
There's no cameras, correct.
Well, I
Yes,
understand
yes,
that,
yeah.
but I don't want the public to misunderstand
No,
that.
I'm glad you clarified. Yeah, the cameras are just on the entrances, the main entrance. There's nothing inside the bathroom whatsoever.
All right.
Yeah.
One other thing, and maybe this is more, it talks about we buying a quantity of 33, so I think from what you're saying, that would be for in the restrooms and hallway,
Yeah, the devices, the 33 are in the bathroom.
all the different bathrooms, okay.
Yeah, and we ended up having to buy so many because, and some of the stalls that we had that are from ceiling to floor, you have to do individual ones in there. So the ones that have a gap, it can cover more stalls, so.
I want to just tell you thank you for piloting this, and I know that this is something that we've, as a school board, have been concerned about for quite a while, and we just want our kids to be safe and healthy, and this is just one, like Leslie said, just one, important step that we can do. So thank you for doing this for us.
Yeah, anytime, definitely. Thank you.
I have a couple of questions. So you mentioned doing a pilot at the middle school next year. Is vaping a problem that you're seeing significantly at the middle school as well?
So I'm not there yet, but I've been talking to my assistant principals that I'm going to end up having, and yeah, they're seeing it even at the 6th grade level. They shared with me that they had, I don't know what their exact numbers are. I know the high schools because I put all the data entry for the state, so it's a little bit easier for me to pull that right away. But I know just this morning when I was talking with Ms. Waddell, she said that they even have 6th graders that are getting busted with THC, and more of their vapes are THC than nicotine as well. They're seeing the same trend.
Okay, thank you. And then kind of a two-part question. So I was wondering, I was looking over the proposal. I don't see anything in here about like maintenance or replacement. If something happens to any of the devices, what's the plan for that?
And so there's warranties with it, and
Okay.
also because it's a cloud-based program, any updates are automatic. Like, we don't have to pay for future updates to that. Now, if there's equipment down the road that changes, in 3 or 4 years, then they would give us a discount in reference to that equipment if we were to replace it. But they have warranties, and then the good thing too is that the equipment has gone down significantly from what it was just 3 years ago, so it's more affordable now. The other thing, if they try to tamper with it, it will let them know that somebody is tampering with it and tell them immediately, so.
Okay. And then I might have just answered my own question, but the license is for 3 years. So would we expect to see this $8,500 price again in 3 years?
We could, yes.
Okay.
And we only did a 3-year to not push that out, because you can do a 3 or a 5 usually, and just to keep it at 3 to see where we're at with that in 3 years.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I also wanted to ask about some of the tampering piece. Oh, that actually happened this year once. We had a tampering notice go off. We went in there, the vape had been pulled from the ceiling. They're really sturdy. We didn't have to repair it, and actually Paul was able to come out with tech, and they were able to reinstall and put it back up. So it's not like we had to call the company to have them come out and reinstall it. It was pretty easy for them to put back in. So at least I can say from our instance, as far as tampering goes or vandalism, they're pretty tough. Like, when that one got ripped out of the ceiling, we were like, oh man, are we gonna have to get a whole new one? And it was just a new ceiling tile, and they managed to just pop it right back up into the ceiling, and there was no damage. It was working just fine.
I was just going to ask about how, not knowing what these really are like, but you answered it, the tampering part, how tamper-proof, if you will.
Yeah, it
works.
seemed like it worked really well. Like I said, we get the same notification that we do if it's detecting a vape. Immediately, we get something on our phone, we get a notification through email, and it says, hey, tampering's currently happening there right now. We can send security to go right there, or I can go, or an administrator, we can go check real fast. And then we can go back, it does the same thing on the footage. I can look at the motion and see who was in there, and I can start narrowing it down real quick to kind of figure out what had happened.
This is an action item.
I move to approve purchasing vape detectors from CDW for Emporia High School as submitted.
Second.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item is 7F, expansion of district benefit offerings.
Okay. I feel like this has been my night. One of the things that, as we continue to look at our insurance and look at some options and provide to our staff, is one of the things I talked with IMA about was, which they had shared with me too, was some options we offer for our retirees. If currently our retirees, when they're leaving, they can opt to take our health insurance, and they can also opt to take our dental, not the vision. And so what came out of the conversation with IMA was looking at, and we've had some staff that are leaving that are not retiring, asking for some options to be able to stay on our health insurance and stay on our pool. So after talking with IMA also felt like, this was a good idea to allow individuals, because a lot of our staff that are leaving at the 5 or 10 year mark are, around the age of 30, in late 20s, I could say late 20s, and then 30s and their 40s. So what it's doing is it's adding different age groups to our pool and giving us an opportunity to keep those individuals on our pool. And because our retirees are over 200 individuals that are staying on there. So it creates a more balance with the individuals that are in the pool. So talking to them and having a conversation, Jared and I talked, and Dr. Harder, and we were just, going through some historical things, and Kate, as to, why do we not offer, if we offer the dental and we offer why are we not offering the vision? Like, is there a reason why we're not? And there really was not a reason. So why not just offer a full package to our retirees and also offer it to individuals that are leaving the district? And if they choose to take that and to pay for it, it would not be a cost to the district, as once they leave from the district, they have to pay for it at full price out of their pocket. They would still have the option, you still have to offer COBRA, but there's I think it's a 2 or 3% fee that is added on to that when people go Cobra. It's the same thing, you have to pay the full price. So one of the things was trying to get an opportunity with individuals that have left the district this year and retirees to get people on there this year, because we can't go back and add them. And that's the other caveat. You have to be on the insurance, because Blue Cross and Blue Shield, you know, the rules to be added onto the insurance, you can't jump on there if you've never been on there, or be added unless there's a significant life change. So the way the retirees read was continuing for those that are already on there. So that's what we are asking, and we brought it to IBB to try to move this forward so we can grab this now as we start going into the next fiscal year with the July 1st and try to, and so we would go back. Melissa has the contacts for employees that were continuing and that were on it this year, and offer it to them. And then the retirees, we would go back, the ones that have opted to continue, and offer the vision to them. So asking for approval to go ahead and implement that, and Melissa will start on that and start contacting individuals.
So the question I have is, this needed to go to IBB to be able to make this change?
It came out of IBB because it's in our negotiated agreement. And so that's where it was discussed in there, and then to bring it back to the board for approval. So we're asking for approval before it goes through the negotiated agreement, which there's policies attached to that, which would come in July that we would update if the board approves it tonight.
So I guess it seems like a positive thing for us, but would it then be added to that agreement? We wouldn't be able to take it away unless we negotiated it out.
Correct.
So to me, sometimes it gets put in there, it's hard to get it out, even if we have a good reason. So, yeah, that just concerns me a little bit.
You know, that didn't come up at all during IBB. You know, we have some really vocal advocates in that group, and no one expressed any concern, but that is definitely not something I'd even thought about, Art. Oh, what you have to say, Jamie?
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that as also, because if we were to, you know, not want to do this, that would be a negotiable takeaway. So, you know, if we're taking something away, would we have to give something in its place? Financially, like, it seems like a benefit, and when I first heard about it, I thought, this sounds great, but then also, it can also hurt us too, if there's some really high usage that comes out of some of the former employees, and I hadn't thought of that previously.
Well, I wonder if we could do this but not put it in a negotiated agreement.
Well, so thinking this through, since it's a board policy, the board could approve it, and then it could go through policy and could still be in play. I don't know why you couldn't. I mean,
We could get some attorney guidance on
yeah,
that, just to
and
make sure.
ask to make sure, but, you know, because board policy always isn't in negotiated agreement. It backs up negotiated agreement, but, so.
I would be happy with whatever the legal advice would be, but I guess I would err on not codifying it in IBB or that negotiated agreement, and maybe still offer it and test it, and then maybe we could later on, but that might be something that could be negotiated.
Sure.
Yeah, and I'm in agreement with that. I don't think we should bind our hands to it, but I do think it may be a financial benefit to us to do it.
So are you thinking approve it, and then we'll bring it back for policy, and then also hear what the attorney says about the IBB? So we're kind of separating it a little bit, where it's looked at as approved, we'll put it in a policy, which the board does, and then IBB will be discussed separately with them on whether it's placed in? Is that what?
I think I would prefer to get the legal guidance first before we were to pass it.
Yeah, but isn't there a deadline?
Yeah, we're trying to get it on the July 1st when we hit that cycle.
Because
with
if we don't approve it, then it's too late for those people to
that just left or retired.
stay on.
Right. When are we approving the negotiated agreement?
Where you have to,
Are we going to have a special meeting for that? Because I just wonder if we could.
No, it would be the 9th, right, Kate, on the calendar?
So we wouldn't have a special meeting for that. I was just wondering if we talked about it, I thought maybe having a special meeting if we
Yeah.
needed to. So we could always push it off a little.
I mean, I suppose we could have a special meeting for this if we so desire.
I wonder if another option could be that if the attorney says that it can go in policy and not in negotiated agreement, approve it on that, but that if it is not able to go in policy, and it would need to go into negotiated agreement, bring it back to the board.
Yeah, we would just.
And then if you would approve that where it would be in policy, and that would be the only way it would be approved, not negotiated agreement, and then if it needed to go to negotiated agreement, bring it back to the board to decide what you want to do.
That's fine either way. I think we just need to anticipate a special meeting is what I'm hearing.
Okay, and I was thinking, what would be an option to be able to move forward if the attorney just says, yep, we can
Right.
do that in policy. But if you want to do a special meeting, that's fine too.
What do we want?
Well, I think we would have to, if the attorney said it couldn't go through policy, but had to go through negotiated agreement, we would have to have a special meeting because
oh,
by the
Yeah.
last week of June.
I don't know, I guess I thought we could say approval contingent upon approval from legal advice, and then, are you okay with that?
But just into policy, I mean, I
Yeah.
think Art's point is
Sure.
really important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. Let me just see what I can come up here with. So I move to approve the change to allow retiring and resigning staff to maintain health, dental, and vision benefits after separation, contingent upon approval from district legal counsel to add this to district policy. Thanks. Did I cover it? Yeah, okay.
It's like nobody talked to Casey right now. She's trying to type it.
Second?
And so, if I can just, no, you're good. So if legal counsel says, no, that doesn't work, but doing just policy, where are we at that point then?
Then you get to see me again later this month.
That's fine.
For a very short meeting.
Yes.
Okay.
Please double check that wording and make sure it's correct. Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the next item is 8A, board reports. Is there a report from the Tech College?
Yes, we met on Monday. It was a nice meeting. It was our first meeting in 9 months, 10 months with 7 board members. We filled our 7th position with Adrienne Burris from Michelin. She will serve the board well. She asked great questions. We're really excited to have her. We got a department highlight from Ryan Brooks in the marketing department. Tech College is working really hard on promoting themselves and increasing enrollment. And we also got a sunset report on our strategic plan, and then looking forward to the new strategic plan. And it was also my last meeting as board chair.
Okay, and then is there a report from the Rec Commission?
Yeah, all I'll say with the Rec Commission is that we've had a new executive director for a while. She's doing really well. I met with her recently, just one-on-one to check in, kind of a coffee and convo with the ERC. And there's been some discussions with the city about a joint task force, and that really is probably the big rec center update, but I'll save that for later because it is an agenda item later on this meeting.
Thank you. Okay, item 8B is the recognition of retiring district leaders. And I think Jamie is going to read something, but then we're going to take some pictures too, so be prepared for that.
We would like to invite Dr. Allison Anderson Harder, Mrs. Judy Stanley, and Mr. Jared Giffen to come forward. In appreciation of their commitment to engage, empower, and inspire generations of students in our community, the Emporia Public Schools Board of Education would like to recognize Dr. Allison Anderson Harder, Mrs. Judy Stanley, and Mr. Jared Giffen for their impressive and lengthy service to our school district and to our community. We wish you happiness, new adventures, and relaxation in the coming years.
We would also like to take this time to acknowledge all of the pink in the room and get a quick photo. So if everyone would come forward that's wearing pink tonight and jump in the photo.
Tell us what to do next.
Okay, so we have one more thing that we're going to do on our recognition that was inspired by Dr. Harder. Each of the board members is going to share one of their highlights from the past 4-ish years, probably. I don't know if there's someone that wants to start. Yeah.
Well, it was exactly, oh no, there she goes. Grant has been waiting for this. 3 years ago was my first summer on the board, and I was new to everything, and we went through a very rough situation with the William Allen White thing. And in the moment, it was a very tough thing for all of us to go through, the community and all of us to go through, just in terms of kind of not knowing what the best thing to do was, or knowing what the best thing to do was and not wanting to do that. So we ended up, compromising and kind of working together and going into the trenches and figuring out how to deal with that. And again, it wasn't fun, but it gave me a good idea of what it's like to work together and just figure things out. And you survived that, and now I look at what William Allen White has become, and it's part of our legacy. So again, in the moment, I know that you're like, oh no, that was a terrible memory, but it ended up as a positive thing. I teach my students about when you interview about behavioral question, tell us about a time when you turned a negative into a positive, and you're supposed to be able to answer that. And that's what we did. We turned a really tough situation together, working together, into something that turned out really positive, and I'm thankful for that.
So many things. So Allison and I have been together for so long, from our Walnut days, and there's so many good things, like our efforts on the performance-based budgeting committee to advocate for Walnut and all the schools in this district, the remodeling of the notorious Sunshine bathroom at Walnut that was not sunshiny, the comfort and guidance you gave me after the Newtown, Connecticut shooting when I had a first grader. You consoled me and helped me feel that I knew my kids were safe at Walnut. So many good things. And then I'm also super proud of our $15 an hour minimum and working with you to make that happen. That was a huge thing for our district and a catalyst in the community. So I really appreciate so many things, but we've been together a long time.
Well, like Leslie, we've been together a long time, right back to the very beginning. I've had 2 superintendents now, and I will tell you, hands down, you're my favorite. You're going to be the bar that I measure other superintendents to. And I was rooting for you. I went to bat for you when you applied. And the thing that always stood out to me about you was how you sort of muscled your way into that interview. Like you kind of, you did. You were like, we didn't really advertise it. It was a very tumultuous time. And so, you kind of unprompted, you put your application, your email in, you said, I've got an interest, I've got a passion, and you said, I'm ready to make myself known. And you did, and you did a good job, and I'm proud of you, and I'll always believe in you.
So there are the rules, and then I'm going to say what I want. So I have to say what my favorite memory is, and that might involve a lip sync rap battle at Walnut Elementary. And I was really looking for the video so everyone here could see you doing a rap battle, like when my kids were like in 3rd and 5th grade possibly. And I'm like, wow, I love a person who gets in the theme of things, and you did. I mean, look at us tonight. So what I appreciate most about you is that you are a shining example of what it means to be a woman in leadership. And you are a true role model for the next generation of girls and women in our community. One of the things that I find most impressive about you is that you're at your best when you're finding a creative solution to a problem. I love that you advocated for the creation of the child care classroom. I love that what Leslie said, you fought for the $15 minimum wage. You're always doing what you can to take care of our community, not just our school community, but our entire community. So thank you.
Okay, Jamie kind of stole what I was thinking about saying. So something that I think that you and I actually talked about briefly a few years ago, but was that I had never experienced a female superintendent before in my teaching career, in my own education, and it meant a lot to me as an educator and as a woman to see what it looked like. We were at I think at the conference in Wichita, and there was the session on why are there so many female teachers and so few women in school leadership. And I left that thinking how lucky we are to work with you. And there's more that I would say, but I will save for another day. But in short, my moment that I did want to share was something that went back to when I first ran for school board, that it was very important to me that we improved our graduation rates. And it matters a lot to me that that's something that we've done over the past few years. And I'm really proud of that. And that is in part to all of us as a team, but to you as a leader.
Well, there's a lot of things, but piggybacking on what Ellison talked about, so something outside our district, but you have taken leadership in the state of Kansas with women superintendents, and I don't know if you called it focus groups or group or, okay, superintendent chat, but, okay, so, but just leading that, and I know when I would go to state conferences and so forth, many people knew of you through your leadership in that. So what a fine example you've been to them as well as obviously to us. The other thing, when you took the helm of our district, we had a bond issue that started, I think, in November of 2019, and we were a couple of years into that building project that went on for almost 5.5, 6 years now. But you've shown a lot of leadership, because anytime you're doing construction, there's always, I would say hiccups, but challenges, decisions to be made and leadership to be sought. And you've done a great job with that. And we've finally are to this point as a district with facilities, and we have a lot of good facilities that we're all very proud of. So thank you on that.
Who wants to be last on this thing? The things that come to mind is kind of like what Grant said, is the complexity of your job becomes enormous when you add in the bond. And I was thinking the other day, you can be a superintendent and dodge that bullet of having to go through a bond issue. And I felt like ours took a really long time. I don't know if that's normal, but and then the other thing is, the specific thing is, I feel like Jones is kind of a really crowning achievement, and I feel like just continuing to grow that and make it what it is today is really shines on your leadership skills. So thank you.
Well, thank you all. That was very unexpected, so thank you. Thank you.
The next item is 8C, NSBA National Connection Fee for 2025-2026.
So we originally had this on the consent agenda, but we wanted to talk about it, so we pulled it off during agenda review for Art to possibly add a little bit more information, some insight from KASB.
Yeah, so there's been a lot of change going on with NSBA. I think more than half the states have withdrawn from the National School Board Association with the creation of another national association. I don't think either entity is doing really well, but the lack of membership leads to lack of resources, which leads to lack of services that they're able to provide. So in my discussion with other board members in different districts, I think the prevailing thought is that we not renew our membership with NSBA. Now, that's just what I'm hearing, just because there's the lack of the services that we're used to getting from this payment. And that really just puts the onus on us and our state association to advocate for Kansas public education. So maybe we can take these dollars and do that. That's one of the things I'm really disappointed in, is that NSBA, especially most recently, had focused on advocating for public education in DC and getting in front of the most important people who are policymakers to really give support to public education. So while we may not be paying this, we still need to take that up as a district and as a state to advocate for public education. So.
I would agree with you, Art. I feel like Kansas Association of School Boards is probably our best guide on what we need to do at both the state and federal level. And at a time when money just continues to be tighter and tighter, I think we could put these dollars to use somewhere else.
So if I can ask this question, I assume from what I think I've had with other conversations at conference, but we could still utilize their services or conferences or whatever it might be as non-members, right, versus paying this. Is that correct?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay.
There was, I think it's a slightly higher registration fee, but yeah, we could definitely still participate if there was an ongoing national conference.
I'm okay with us not paying these fees. I agree. I mean, KASB is where it's at, right? That's what we're advocating for is what we can do. Think globally, start locally, right? Here in Emporia in Kansas. So I move to not approve, that work? The annual fees for the National School Boards Association Connection Program for 25-26 as submitted.
Second.
Motion passes 7-0.
Next item is 8D, update to board representation to committees/boards for 2025.
We appreciate Dr. Ryan Cardula serving on the Emporia Recreation Commission for 2 terms. His term ends at the end of June, and so looking for someone to replace him, Mr. Nathan Fisher, Emporia High School principal, expressed interest and talked about the responsibilities, and he's very interested in being able to fill that role if board approves.
Well, first, I want to say thank you, Dr. Cardula, for that. 2 years, that's a big commitment, or 4 years, 8 years? 8, 2 4-year terms. I can do math, I promise. I'll blame it on the emotion from earlier this evening. So thank you, first of all, for your service. And I will move to approve the updated annual appointments, naming Mr. Nathan Fisher as the replacement on the Emporia Recreation Commission Board as submitted.
I second.
Motion passes 7-0.
Okay, the next item is 8E, Board Policy Update, first reading.
Dr. Erica Mickelson, Director of Teaching and Learning, is here to present on the AI policy.
Yeah, first I want to say thank you to the AI Policy Committee. Art was on that committee with us, and Dr. Cardula and I were the ones that led that, and we had 4 meetings throughout this year. We really started mid-year and then ran really up till April. And each night, each time we met, was a little bit of learning and a little bit of training. And then we really dug into what does the policy need to have, what the recommendations were from KASB, and what are other districts doing, particularly in the state of Kansas. There are other districts around the nation that are doing some things, but we really wanted to see what like districts were doing. We are actually on the forefront of this with the AI piece, and so that's exciting. Knowing that, though, we will make updates as needed. That periodic yearly look at this will be really important as AI changes, it seems like daily. But as you look at this, we have the purpose. We also wanted to add in some definitions because generative AI is different than just kind of normal AI that you would think of. When you think of generative AI, it's really ChatGPT, Gemini, those types of things. And we wanted to make sure we're not only having guidelines for students, but we're also having that staff look. So anywhere from our teachers to our administrative assistants, and how can we really utilize that to support all staff and students in the district. We also wanted to keep in mind that we're going to have training. So professional development is included in that. I am working on that alongside, I'll be working with that alongside Mrs. Haug, who is coming in as the Director of Teaching and Learning for me here in the next month, and really making sure that the training and professional development is determined and then is given to the staff at the beginning of the year. We will also do training as needed as the year goes on, and that will be for students and staff. I'm trying to think. We will continue to provide all those with the updates, and then if students, I know one of the things, if students violate this acceptable use, that would go to the disciplinary action. So what would be in the student handbook for that tech violation, that's where we would look at kind of what that recommendation would be for discipline.
Are there questions?
I don't know. Art, you have anything to add as a member?
I would just say our students are already using generative AI. You know, how do I, summarize this paper, or what's the meaning of this poetry or something like that. So I think this is important that we acknowledge it, that we train our staff and our teachers and inform our students how it can best be used and some of the things that can go wrong when you use it. And really, I don't want to discourage the use of it. I just want to be able to educate students and use it in a way that you can cite the use of it and take advantage of the technology.
I have one question pertaining to the violations section, but it also goes back to the handbook from a while ago. I don't know that what is in, I'm just looking at the high school handbook, is necessarily in line with the violations section on this policy.
Okay.
And so I know this is just a first reading, so maybe for the second reading, if those could just align better. And the specific part that I'm looking at is that it says that the assignments, they are to get no credit for the assignment in question from the handbook at the high school. And if that is the policy that we have set forth already in the handbook, or vice versa, maybe modify this in some way.
Okay.
To be more in alignment. But that was all.
any way you can monetize credit for this policy when other districts start
There you
copying it?
go. Good
Because, you know,
thought.
like you said, we're at the forefront.
Thank you. Okay, the next item is 8F, Joint Task Force Proposal with City and County. This is also a first reading.
Okay, we have several of us that attended the meeting. Invite Ms. Pam Stranathan to the microphone, and then also Jeremy Dorsey, Ms. Lillian Lingenfelter attended the meeting. This has been proposed primarily by the city, and they have been talking about wanting to reduce the mill levy for the county, the city, and the school district. There's been some, I will just say, attempts at education at the two meetings that Ms. Stranathan and I attended. Mr. Dorsey, Ms. Lingenfelter can also share some information. I think Mr. Dorsey may have attended maybe a few more meetings, and then Ms. Lingenfelter was the last meeting. So for right now, this is being brought to the board for, so the input that I had from, I want to back up a little bit. We had our board agenda review Thursday afternoon, and some concerns were expressed about how can another entity, say, for example, that the school board is going to lower their mill levy or increase it, have any influence on that. So when I reached back out to Trey Hawking and Christina Montgomery, the response that I had was that the board could respond with what they would like to do as far as the wording. So really, it is at the wishes of the board, and then what other information the three of you may want to add to that.
Yeah, so, I've been in a couple of these meetings with the city and have visited with some friends in the city side of the sphere, and I think the way they would phrase it is that they're inviting us not so much because they want 253, and I'm not advocating for their position, just trying to explain how I understand it, that they don't necessarily want us to reduce our mill levy for what we pull in as a school district. What they've kind of imparted to me, what I've taken from it, is they want us in on this because I think what their ultimate plan is, well, I shouldn't say plan, what I think their ultimate preference is that the mill levy that we pull for the rec commission be reduced and offset with some sort of sales tax increase. And I question whether that would actually be a tax break for people. Are you paying more in sales tax that year, or are you paying less in property tax if it had been the other way? And even if you break even, it feels a little illusory to me. But I think that's what the city is frankly gunning for when it comes to the rec commission. I think that's why they really want us in on there. I'm not opposed to working together, trying to find creative solutions. My apprehension with this, though, is that seeing the city and county in some of those meetings is a little bit like cat and dogs. Are we really going to have enough people here to create a consensus that is actually viable for all the different partnerships? Is it necessary to go through this if ultimately you're really recommending one thing that interests the school board, which is reducing the mill on the rec commission and then offsetting it with a city sales tax? So, I'm not opposed to working on it. I just question whether or not we're really going to get something productive at the end of it. So a little apprehensive, but those are my thoughts.
I'm going to piggyback what you're saying. I think one of my concerns was when listening to that is our reduction, we can't really do much with our reduction. So we're more or less sitting at the table. My concern would be is if there's a majority there that decide to want to pass a sales tax, what position that would put us in, because we're not the entity that makes the decision. The city would be for passing that sales tax. And it was brought up in that meeting that maybe it doesn't need to occur, that the city should just look at that, which part of me agreed to that because it really is the city. We're not influencing that sales tax. I think one of the things that was brought up was in reference to if they're wanting to reduce the mills or they're wanting to take over with what's going on with the parks and recs in the town and the rec center, then, there's no, I don't think there's enough education that they have in reference to what that entails of what the cost, and after being on the rec board as a treasurer, I've seen that, and I shared that in that meeting, is that, you know, you're making these assumptions, but you don't understand what that cost potentially could be, or what that's going to do to your community. And so I think just sitting at the table and giving input's one thing, but being at the table and a consensus is made, and then it comes out of that looking like the school district agrees there should be a sales tax and there shouldn't be, you know, things should be dismantled. That made me very uncomfortable on the district's behalf.
I agree with your caution, Pam. Just the title of the task force, the Joint Task Force on Mill Levy Reduction, I think one really sets the expectation that all of the entities are going to be exploring it. And if one entity is interested in this, then one entity, you know, they have the taxing authority to just do what they want. And so I don't even know what the result would come out of this that would really impact the school board. We're the taxing authority for our mill levy. And so I don't want to set up that expectation or have a task force that doesn't study the budget as well as I think we do, or you and your team does, to, you know, kind of try to influence what our responsibility is, and one that we take very, very seriously. I also just question the timing of this, because we already know as a school board that the legislature's already working to retool the school finance funding formula for next year. We know that the legislature's also thinking about property tax reduction again next year, because they failed to do so this year. So there's a lot of moving parts, and I just worry it's premature for us to be involved in this when we don't know what school finance could look like in 6 months.
I will say that when we were looking at the membership and there was discussion, there was good discussion about how to balance the membership. So I do want to say that as a positive, that there's been some really good discussion, and I think we've walked away also with a better understanding of what the county and the city do. So this could be a first reading. It's really what the board would like to do. If you would like some wording changes on that, we'll make note of that and then take that back to the city, or you could vote it down also, whatever, or other options.
I don't know. This is really strange to me. Like, should we be communicating and talking about things as a group? Well, sure, but we're rarely invited to the table. But I also, like, the 7 of us were elected. We're our own board. We have our own rules to follow on our own budget, and I would never want to be tied to someone telling us what we get to set our mills at. Like, that's not what we were elected to do, is to listen to all taxpayers, of course, but not one group who thinks they, for lack of a better term, outrank us. So, no, I would need to see way more information before I ever agreed to something like this.
I guess, kind of what everybody else is saying, that nobody can force the school district to lower our mill levies. That's the job of the board. So is the end goal of this a recommendation? That's all it is? It wouldn't have any teeth?
Yes, it's, the end goal of it would be some sort of joint recommendation that every board could choose to adopt or not. And, you know, my apprehension is that I think there's just maybe enough divergent positions in this that I question how you would ever actually get a consensus-based recommendation. You know, and part of this, you know, we talk about, like, when we think about us, we think of our mills, but, you know, the county can't do a sales tax. So telling them to lower their mills, you know, the county commissioners kind of throw a fit about that, because that's not really how their budget works. They can't generate their revenue for their budget any other way, right? So, you know, I just feel like I feel like the city is gunning for one thing, and it's the rec commission mills, and I don't know that we need to make it a whole club.
And for that to dissolve, that would have to come back to a vote. I mean, that's, you know, but I don't, to me, for, which I had shared at that meeting, those mills are not hurting. You know, those mills are flow-through going to support that program, which supports a lot of our kids. And it was even brought up that if it was to flow to the city and they were to do what they were still going to have to raise potentially to offset the cost. So it wouldn't be dissolve it here and move it here. It's still, I mean, it's still going to cost. That's where I had brought up about, you know, nobody in that room is understanding besides Amanda what that looks like for how much that budget and what that, you know, it's just that concept of moving it was going to help in some capacity. I don't know. I go with Leslie. It was there was just not enough information. I mean, it
Plus,
was.
our city commission could look really different come January. Like, who knows if that commission will even want this? I would not be in favor of moving forward anytime soon.
Yeah, I agree with you. Like, I don't even know what changes, I mean, I did suggest a title change for the task force, but beyond that, there's so much, I don't even know what other changes I would make that, or suggest making that would get me to vote for this. If we want to take up our mill levy, we'll do it at this table, in my opinion.
I did a little research, just a little, about sales tax, and to me, it's potentially more harmful for our low-income communities, our families. And so I'm very leery of supporting dropping the property mills and using a sales tax, because I feel like, you know, low-income families are spending a lot of their budget to make monthly obligations. And so I really, that makes me very uncomfortable.
Do we take it to a vote just to see where we land, Lillian, or
I mean, go ahead. I mean, yeah, that's an option too. I was just letting you all continue discussing. I am open to whatever motion or lack thereof.
Well, obviously, at the table here, there's enough question about it. I would either say no vote, to not take a vote at all. We can take, I mean, if we want to bring it up at a future date, we could, but I don't think, I'm not feeling the support, at least tonight, for the way it's written.
And it is just set as a first reading. We don't have to make a decision tonight if we feel like we want more time. The city is not bringing it up on their agenda until next week. Are there, I guess I'll say this, and if you think of a question later, I suppose you could let Jeremy or myself know, since we had been attending the meetings, or if you have another question, email it to one of us, I suppose, ahead of the second reading, which would be at our July meeting. Okay, the next item is 9A, strategic plan measures, also a first reading.
Okay. Well, first of all, you all threw me with the highlights, so thank you very much. I've appreciated working with all of you, and I really appreciate also just the energy and the support to look outside of our district and outside of our state to bring in new ideas about how we can improve Emporia. So I very much have appreciated that. The district support team, so they were all very excited about wanting to present, and so I am going to share this information. They are here to provide additional information if you have any questions. So this originally came up during board leadership with Ms. Lingenfelter and Ms. Reaver, and we were talking about the measures, and then looking back when we had first approved those, when the board first approved them back in March 2022, they were very ambitious. And so when we look back at that, we had just approved the strategic plan, we were looking at measures, and we were coming out of COVID not really still understanding that there was going to be some gaps. So we did set some pretty high marks. These are the different areas on the priorities and the slides that they're on. If you'll keep moving on. So this is the timeline. So we originally talked the first semester, and then the district support team, we've spent a lot of time really dissecting and looking at the data that we have. We are a very data-rich district, and so we have a lot of great assessment that we can look at and look at our baselines. So we spent a lot of time. We took also to district leadership team and really dug into that. That was the primary discussion item for both of those meetings. So we had a lot of discussion. They got input from building leadership teams, site councils, and then came back with other suggestions. And then brought this up at the March 12th Board of Education meeting during our quarterly report, talking about updating the measures. This is the first reading with a second reading slated for the second meeting in July. So state assessments, the challenge, and we've mentioned this, is that they are, the baseline data is going to be different. So just keeping in mind that that is going to be different, and so looking at that when the state assessment results come through. But that's our baseline, and then getting input from principals about what is attainable. So we want this to be ambitious. We also want it to be attainable. So that's what a good goal is that it is ambitious and pushes us while also attainable so we can keep pushing forward. So that is unless anyone has questions, just because state assessments, and then also if you'll go to the next slide, FastBridge is the same thing, renorming those. So those are going to be two areas that will have to be looked at in the future as well, but you can see the baseline data and then what the goal would be. Our graduation rate, we've been looking at that and looking at our baseline, and so we've been making some nice progress with that, and we want to keep that greater than or higher than 95%. 95% or higher, I should say. Any questions on those areas? Social emotional, we had a lot of conversation about that. We're very proud of our Capturing Kids' Hearts and being National Showcase Schools and National Showcase District. So looking at that, and you'll see there was some baseline data that there was just too much to include. So you will see there is an attachment there for CKH, the data baseline. So the goal there is that we would like to have 3 or more data points above the National Showcase School baseline at the mid-year survey line. So that would, we talked a lot about student data, parent, teachers, and just making sure that we are setting aside time and really advocating to get those surveys completed. So those are our goals for that. So we have that really positive. The other area that we talked about a lot was also looking at continuing to improve our behavior, which CKH does, but then also what is another way of measuring that. So the one thing that we looked at, we originally looked at disciplinary logs, and then as we were having more discussion, we found that we really need to do better calibration across pre-K through high school. So a better measure would be in-school suspension or out-of-school suspension rates. So if you look at the next slide, you'll see that we're talking a very small number of students. So when that would be reported, we would need to be very careful that we were not separating out by grade or even by elementary schools, because it would be very easy to be able to identify. If you knew the student population, you might know, well, I know who that is. We don't want that. A question that came up during agenda review is that if there is an in-school suspension, let's say in November, and another one in December, would that count as 2 separate incidents? And it would. And really, the goal of all of our principals, our teachers, our student support specialists, counselors, to keep students at school. So that is our primary goal. And if we are looking at in-school suspension or out-of-school suspension, it is really involving a safety issue, and then we're teaching the behaviors. So we have, we're very lucky that we have a behavior specialist, and then we are also growing that so we can continue to work on that. Any questions about that? Climate survey, so looking at that, because that can be somewhat subjective, we were looking very carefully at objective, unbiased types of measures. So looking at increasing the percentage of how many climate surveys were completed. So we did have some climate surveys that were partially completed. This would be fully completed. So 719 individuals completed that in 2023, and we would like to increase that 5%. Any questions there?
I have a question.
Okay.
How are the climate surveys distributed? Is it like in an email or Parent Square?
So we would, since we started Parent Square this year, we didn't have it with the climate survey. That would be a way that we did that, and we did that through social media. Lindell, would you like to come up and answer a little bit more?
Yes, we did that through, we used the system that we had then was Constant Contact. So we sent it out to all of our students and families and all of our staff that way. And then we also did quite a bit on social media. We actually had closed it down and we were still wanting to get some more, so we opened it back up and we did that another round of blast of emails, social media, those kinds of things as well. We also shared that on our local media outlets as well, so we could get that into the community as well. Did not use Parent Square, it wasn't there, but we could definitely do that next time around and maybe have a little bit more focused approach for that.
Okay. Thank you. So parent engagement is very important. So when we look at our preschool through elementary, we have generally a pretty high percentage of attendance when it comes to parent-teacher conferences. And a lot of that has to do with scheduling conferences as well as teachers following up with parents who aren't able to come or don't show up unexpectedly. So they feel like that 95% or higher for pre-K through elementary is something that is ambitious and attainable. The same thing on the next slide, that we have 2 slides of baseline data. And then Emporia Middle School also has a pretty good parent engagement percentage. And so looking at that 93%, and so you'll see that they had a little bit lower this year, but the year before they were a little bit higher. So wanting to continue to maintain that 93%, and they felt like they could continue to get that attendance. The high school is much more difficult. Parents a lot of times who come to the high school conferences are not the ones that the teachers and the principals really want to talk to. And so we had a lot of conversation about this. We thought that Power School logins would be a way to show parent engagement. So parents, a lot of times with their high school students, are expecting them to be a little bit more independent. So they're wanting to grow that with them. So a lot of times they're looking on Power School. What we would like them to do is that we would like parents, if their student is failing a class, even one class, we want to make sure that they are checking Power School. The challenge with this, you'll see that asterisk there, is that if they're using the app, it does not track that. So this is the first reading. We're continuing to look at that. Again, open to ideas, and it might be that pilot this one with the high school this year, and then just come back and revisit that. Lillian, I think you had a suggestion during agenda review about maybe another way of looking at that.
So during agenda review, I had just shared that I have seen other schools as part of their CAP or advisory course class require students to have an adult at conferences with them. So the students might make a presentation or have put together something that talks about how they're doing in their classes, what their plans for the future are, and that it didn't necessarily have to be a parent, but could just be a trusted adult. And then that was part of their grade for that advisory class. It's certainly not a perfect solution, but it might better reflect parent-teacher conference attendance if those are the measures that we're using at other buildings. Also, just sitting here, I was wondering if it's possible, like, have we talked to anyone at Power School? Is this something the app can do? Or what do future iterations of Power School app look like?
We can look into that. Dr. Karjala talked with Stephanie Murray quite a bit about how we could track that. So there has been some time spent on that, but we can look at that a little bit deeper too. Okay, thank you. And speaking of Parent Square earlier, so utilizing multiple means, so Parent Square has been very successful. We would like to continue to increase that usage by 2%. The baseline this year is 48% family usage. Does anyone have any questions about Parent Square? When we've done the quarterly report, it's been amazing how many messages go out in the threads. Very, very impressive. So we're very happy with Parent Square. Actively recruit and retain, maintain that job fill rate. So we're really looking at the first day of each semester. So knowing that we're going to have some more classified staff that we may be looking at positions that are open, and occasionally we have licensed staff, so we may have several positions for licensed staff that are open in the fall, but then we have teacher interns that we're able to hire in January. So that's one way of looking at that and looking at both semesters. So of course, we would like 100% for licensed staff and 100% for administrative positions, and then also looking at that 96% for classified staff, and knowing that classified staff are on a different work agreement, and so that will fluctuate a little bit more. Really, even though we've been frustrated with some of our openings, that we are still pretty happy compared to some other districts that have a lot of openings. Brent was just talking earlier, he left, but he was very excited that he hired 2 science teachers, so you all approved those tonight, so that was very exciting. Any questions on job fill rates? Okay. Moving along over to teacher turnover rates, so we would like for the teacher, or well, I should say licensed staff member, we'll just say teacher turnover rate each year, so less than 14%. Our baseline data last year was 12.3, and the year before that was 15.8, so that was a little bit higher. But we want to keep that low turnover rate. Any questions on that? Okay. And then we had a lot of conversation about this as well, and so really, the goal there is to continue to make sure that we are being as competitive as possible. We had a good conversation during IBB meetings this year, and so knowing that as the budget allows, we are being as competitive as possible with both our salary and our benefits. And then there's baseline data that's attached to this agenda item. Safety and security is always a top priority, and so completing 100% of all safety and security drills for all schools. There is an example, so the example that's attached to the agenda item is just one school, but the actual spreadsheet has all the schools, but that was just one example. And then continuing to make sure that we can have our Project Adam drills, using with our sports teams, first aid and CPR, and then having AEDs in all of our buildings, which that is a sense of pride for our district that we have that. So thank you again to the board for that. Any questions on that one? Okay. And then we had a lot of conversation about this as well. So how do we continue to maintain and evaluate safe and secure learning environments? And so that goes back to that 1 to 3 and 5-year plan for technology, maintenance, and transportation, food service, and operations. So looking at least 90% of those identified needs, knowing that even with the best plans that we have surprises along the way, but continuing to make sure that we're addressing at least 90% of those needs. So then looking at instructional resources, so we've talked about that a lot, making sure that there is fidelity, that when resources are approved through the board, that those are implemented with fidelity, not only the textbooks, but also the digital resources and everything else that's approved. So looking at that, electronic walkthrough, so the baseline is in process. The first part of that is SIOP, so that's Sheltered Instruction Observation Protocol. That is part of our district improvement plan, so that's why that's really important that we have that piece in there, and there's been great trainings that have been happening this summer already. And then looking at that 65% walkthrough, making sure that there's district-approved resources such as CKH, Second Step, HMH. And then that notation there that the 25-26 quarterly report will dedicate a section to report specifically about secondary math progress and use of approved resources with fidelity. So Dr. Cargilla has been, just as an aside with that, has been working on a plan. And so those opportunities for students and parents will start next Monday, and then continuing to monitor to make sure that those resources are being implemented with fidelity.
I have a question.
Yes.
So what do you mean by, okay, I see what you're saying. 65% of the walkthroughs will reflect use of the resources?
Right. So of course we would want 100%, but then we also might have students where they're in small groups and they might be doing some other work, and so trying to make sure that we're allowing for times for that they're doing group work, or maybe they're doing projects that they're not actually having the textbook in hand, but then there's also other ways that we are looking at that. And that's where that action plan that Dr. Cargil is working on and will present at the July meeting, the first July meeting for first reading, will really focus on secondary math. So this will be all of the resources. We did talk a lot about what that percentage should be, and knowing that we want to give people, you know, make sure that we're giving them credit, that if they just use the resource and then here comes the principal with the walkthrough and they're not actually using it at the time, how do we make sure, and that might be questions for the students, that there's a lot of ways that making sure that they're identifying the parameters to make sure that that data is really consistent.
Right, because I know, as all teachers know, that sometimes the walkthrough or the observation is just such a small snippet in what is really a whole class or a whole day's worth of teaching. So it can be hard to measure that in a short amount of time. Personally, I would like to see that percentage be higher, but I also understand the difficulty that you all will have in measuring that as well.
Sure. And Judy, do you want to add anything more? And if I've said everything.
I just wanted to speak.
Sure.
See,
One last time. Dr. Harder said it very well. It's that we really were having a hard time coming up with that percentage. We can adjust it up, we could adjust it back, but it's little things like, we know sometimes, I don't know if you remember when Megan Powers was here and she was talking about curriculum alignment, and for second grade, we have to supplement when it comes to telling time. So we know that sometimes we're supplementing with a resource that isn't our resource. So trying to figure out what that wiggle room is, there's just a lot of components. But on the same hand, we don't want to leave so much wiggle room that we step away from the resource because, well, the walkthrough is a 5-minute snippet of time. So it's really hard to find that balance. So we're open to ideas. It's just that's where we landed when we were working with the principals.
No, you're the expert on that one.
I am not an expert. I just think, thinking about the conversations we have had at this table in the past about investment in resources and how we want them to be used, and that we know that they need to be being used.
So we can take this back. So we're taking feedback, and then I'll talk to Dr. McGehee, and then he'll have an opportunity to DLT before that second board meeting for the second reading.
Okay.
Next is the data dashboard. So Dr. Cargila put in these current measures and then some of those baselines. So that is something that the board has asked for as far as having that data dashboard. So any questions? It's color-coded. Okay, so our next steps would be if any additional questions or feedback, or if you think of something later, please let me know. That feedback will be shared with Dr. McGehee, and then he'll bring that back the second board meeting in July.
I guess my other question is, just from this slide, is do we not have data on in and out of school suspensions from the past couple of years?
Yes, that was on that one slide. And we can pull more.
Right. Sorry, it's not on the data dashboard in the colored parts.
Oh. We could add that. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, no.
Any other questions or observations to share?
I should have just said it back when we were talking about it, but I'll share personally, my parents didn't go to parent-teacher conferences like my last 3 years, because they were like, what are they going to tell me? You're a good kid, blah, blah, blah. Like, so it wasn't that they didn't care. It was like, oh, we have other stuff to do. And I'm not sure my mom would be like, Leslie, I can't believe you're sharing that. But, you know, like, I just think that parents, especially like if this is your 4th kid, you're like, whatever. I just wish we could find a way to help people feel more excited to come to those. Because I would want to hear my kid's awesome. I don't know what was wrong with my parents.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions? Thank you for sharing. Because I think that they've tried a lot of different approaches and nothing seems to quite hit the mark. So, okay. That's a first reading, so thank you very much.
Thank you. And thank you to everyone for all of your hard work on that. Oh, okay. have any questions for him? Okay. The next item is 10A, executive session for a student.
I move to enter executive session for 10 minutes to discuss confidential student information pursuant to the exception relating to actions adversely or favorably affecting a student under coma. Superintendent Dr. Allison Anderson Harder and Director of Assessments and Accountability Dr. Ryan Cardula are invited to join this session.
I forgot to put a return time on there. Would you mind adding that for me?
Yes,
Thank you.
We will return to regular session at 7:51 PM.
Second.
Motion passes 7-0. Motion passes 6-0.
I move to enter executive session for 10 minutes to discuss confidential student information pursuant to the exception relating to actions adversely or favorably affecting a student under coma. Superintendent Allison Anderson Harder and Director of Assessments and Accountability, Dr. Ryan Cardula, are invited to join the session. We'll return to this room at 8:03 p.m.
Second. We do a hand vote, please. Motion passes 6-0. Motion passes 7-0.
Okay, I have a motion. Feel free to chime in if I mangle it, but I'm going to make a motion that the Board of Education adopt Resolution 2025-3 to modify the extended term suspension as recommended by the hearing officer and instead implement the first hearing officer's decision to include the probationary plan.
It's written out.
There you go.
I'll second.
Yeah, Casey, you're gonna fix it? Yeah. What if I already clicked? That's okay.
Motion passes 6-1.
Well, I made, okay, thank you. Okay. There we go. Fixed.
Change your vote if you want to. Okay. Can I go, Casey?
Motion passes 7-0.
I move to enter into executive session for 15 minutes for the exception for matters which would be deemed privileged in the attorney-client relationship under the Kansas Open Meeting Act, and that we return to open session in this room at 8:20 p.m. Superintendent Dr. Allison Anderson Harder, Assistant Superintendent of Business Operations Pam Stranathan, and Attorney Tammy Samoji are invited to join the board for this session. No action is anticipated.
Second.
Motion passes 7.
I motion to return to regular session.
Second?
Second.
Motion passes 7-0.
Okay. The next item is 11A, future board calendar dates. Our next meeting will be Wednesday, July 9th at 6 PM here at Mary Herbert Education Center. And then we have another meeting in July, on July 23rd at 6 PM here at Mary Herbert Education Center. Wednesday, August 12th at 7:30 AM will be convocation, and that will be held at Plum Hall at Emporia State University. And then, Casey, which date is, it says Wednesday, August 13th, and Wednesday, August 12th.
Sorry, it should be Tuesday, the 12th, and Wednesday, the 13th.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, so convocation will be Tuesday, August 12th at 7:30 AM, and then our regular board meeting will be Wednesday, August 13th at 6 PM. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion passes 7-0.